He built a company worth $3 billion on the principle that data never lies. Every transaction logged, every access point recorded, every anomaly flagged, investigated, resolved. His cloud storage infrastructure secured the data of 40 million users across 19 countries. He was, in the world of enterprise technology, the man who knew where everything was. He just didn't know what was happening in his own home, until the data told him. And then Nico Rivkin did not call a lawyer. He did not confront his wife. He did not send an angry message at midnight. He opened a dashboard, and he built a trap that would take apart two people's lives with the same cold, systematic efficiency he had spent 20 years applying to everything else. Welcome to Corporate Chaos Scandals, the place for the most shocking and unbelievable workplace confession stories. From office drama to hidden secrets, nothing is off limits. Before we get into this, make sure you subscribe and like, because we bring you stories like this every week. His name is Nico Rivkin, 47 years old, the founder and CEO of Vaultline, a cloud storage and data security firm headquartered in Sydney, Australia, with server infrastructure across 3 continents and a client base that included government agencies, major financial institutions, and technology companies whose own data security requirements made them among the most demanding clients in the enterprise technology market. Vaultline was not a consumer product. Ordinary people had not heard of it. The people who had heard of it were the people who needed it, and those people would tell you, if asked, that Nico Rivkin had built the most reliable and most secure data infrastructure available to enterprise clients at any price point. He had built Vaultline the way certain people build things, when they have a specific personal reason to care about security. He was not forthcoming about what that reason was. He did not give personal interviews. He did not engage with the press beyond what the company's corporate communications required. And he had never, in 20 years of running a significant technology firm, described his professional motivations in anything other than technical terms. The people who had known him for a long time understood, without him having said it directly, that the precision and the control were not just professional qualities. They were how Nico Rivkin interacted with the world: total information, total accountability, no variables that could not be tracked. He had met Natasha at an industry event in Singapore 6 years ago. She was 29 at the time. She had been modeling since she was 17, not runway primarily, but commercial and editorial, the kind of modeling that kept you working without making you a name. She was striking in the way that certain people are striking, not just physically, but with a quality of presence that a room responded to before anyone had quite registered why. She was also, which surprised people who made assumptions about models, genuinely curious. She asked questions at events that other people did not ask. She read things. She had opinions. Nico had found this combination, the presence and the mind, the most interesting thing he had encountered in a long time. He did not fall easily. He was not someone who fell at all, in the ordinary sense of the word. He made a considered assessment, and he pursued what he assessed to be worth pursuing, and Natasha had been assessed as worth pursuing. They had married 2 years after Singapore. She had stopped working. This had been a joint decision, though the dynamics of whose preference it had primarily reflected was something that Natasha had thought about more in the years since than in the moment she agreed. She had moved into the Sydney house that Nico had designed specifically for himself, a building that reflected his values architecturally: clean, controlled, everything in its place, nothing that wasn't necessary. Beautiful, in the specific way of spaces where nothing is random. The house was also entirely networked through Vaultline's infrastructure. The smart home systems, every device, every sensor, every camera, at every entry point, ran on Vaultline servers. This was partly for demonstration purposes. The house was a working example of Vaultline's residential premium offering, and partly because Nico Rivkin did not live in spaces he did not fully monitor. Natasha had understood this when she moved in. She had not understood, in the full and specific sense, what it meant. The life that followed was, by every external measure, one that most people would have found enviable. The house, the travel, Nico's business took him to 5 countries regularly, and she went with him for the trips that suited her, the social engagements that came with his professional position, the material quality of a life funded at that level. It was also in the specific and accumulating way that she became more aware of over 3 years, a life that had almost no space that was hers alone. Not because Nico was present constantly, he was frequently absent, working, but because the infrastructure of the life was his. The house was his design and his technology. The social calendar was built around his professional relationships. The travel was his itinerary. She had moved into a space that had been entirely designed before she arrived, and that had not been redesigned to accommodate her presence within it. She was not unhappy, initially. She was restless, which is different. Restlessness is what happens when a person with energy and intelligence and the specific human need for occupation finds that the structure around them does not provide enough friction to give the energy somewhere to go. She joined a gym, an elite, members-only facility in the city where the equipment was excellent and the clients were people who took the work seriously. She had been going for 3 weeks when she was assigned a trainer named Kwame Asante. Kwame was 32 years old, Ghanaian Australian, born in Brisbane, built like the professional athlete he had narrowly not become. He had had trials with a national rugby program at 21 that had ended in a knee injury that required a career pivot, and the pivot had produced someone who brought the same intensity to training others that he had brought to training himself. He was not a man who performed engagement. He was present in every session in the way of someone who found the work genuinely absorbing. The first session was professional. The second was professional. By the fourth, Natasha had begun staying after the session to talk, and Kwame had begun finding reasons the conversation needed to continue, and both of them were being somewhat dishonest with themselves about what the conversations were. She had not been given a specific thing to do with her intelligence and her energy since she moved into the house. Kwame paid attention to her in a way that was not Nico's kind of attention. Not assessment, not analysis, but the particular quality of someone who was interested in what you were actually experiencing, rather than in your position relative to their own understanding. She knew it was wrong. She proceeded. The affair began in month 3 of her gym membership. She had told herself, in the weeks before, that she was not going to let it happen. She told herself this clearly and specifically, and then she found herself in a situation where it was happening, and the rationalization that arrived in the moment was not one she was proud of and was not one she would have accepted from anyone else, but it was the rationalization that arrived. She bought him things. Expensive things. She used an account that Nico's financial infrastructure managed. Not his personal account, but a household allowance account that was structured to cover her personal expenditures. She used it carefully, not the full amounts from any single purchase. Small enough per transaction to sit within what might reasonably be personal spending. In aggregate, over 4 months, she spent approximately $40,000 on Kwame's lifestyle. Clothing, equipment, weekend trips that she described to Nico's calendar system as solo retreats. She had forgotten one thing. She had forgotten that every transaction that ran through that account was logged on Vault-Line servers. Every single one. Nico did not find out the way people normally find out. There was no private investigator. There was no discovered message, no misplaced receipt, no friend who saw something they shouldn't have. There was a data anomaly. The Vault-Line system generated weekly anomaly reports for accounts flagged with irregular transaction patterns. The household allowance account had begun, 4 months into the affair, to show a pattern. Not in any individual transaction, but in the aggregate structure of the spending. The amounts, the timing, the geographic location of the purchases, the system's pattern recognition flagged the combination as inconsistent with baseline behavior. The report sat in a queue that Nico reviewed every Monday. He saw it on a Monday morning in his Sydney office. He opened it. He read it. He pulled the transaction detail. He was Nico Rivkin. He understood what he was looking at within minutes. He did not close the report and call Natasha. He opened a second window. He went to the smart home system. He reviewed the access logs for the previous 4 months. Every entry, every exit, every device activation, every camera flag, the gym, the solo retreats, the time windows. He cross-referenced against the anomalous transactions. He built a picture. He was thorough. This took him 4 hours. At the end of 4 hours, he had a complete account of his wife's affair, documented in data that was time-stamped, verified, and entirely his own infrastructure's output. He closed the windows. He went to a board meeting. He was in the board meeting for 2 hours. He was composed throughout. His CFO said afterward that it was one of the more productive board sessions they had had. He drove home. He had dinner. He said nothing to Natasha that was different from anything he had said at dinner before. He had a plan. He had always had a plan. The difference was that this plan was not for the company. He called his legal team the following morning, not to begin divorce proceedings. Not yet. To review the prenuptial agreement that had been executed before their marriage. He had insisted on a prenuptial agreement. His attorneys had drafted it with the specific thoroughness that Nico's instructions always produced. He went through it with them section by section. He identified the relevant provisions, specifically the clauses relating to marital conduct and the financial consequences of certain defined behaviors. The prenuptial agreement was, in his legal team's assessment, airtight. The behavioral clause was clearly defined. The evidentiary standard required to invoke it was documented transaction data and verifiable evidence of the defined behavior. He had both. He then asked his legal team about Kwame. Not about any legal action against Kwame specifically, but about what legitimate actions a company like Vaultline might take if an individual had been the indirect beneficiary of fraudulently redirected corporate funds. His legal team gave him an analysis. He listened carefully. He made calls. Not inflammatory calls, precise ones. He contacted the management of the gym where Kwame worked. It emerged from a brief conversation with the gym's director, with whom Nico had a professional relationship, because Vaultline provided data management services to the gym's parent company. Aware that the gym's own data management contract was up for renewal. He made it clear, in the way of a man who is very good at making things clear without saying them directly, that his continued enthusiasm for the renewal was connected to the gym's approach to an employee conduct matter he wished to bring to their attention. Kwame's contract with the gym was not renewed. This happened before Natasha knew that anything had been found, before any conversation with Nico, before any confrontation. He also instructed his financial team to conduct a formal review of the household account. Not secretly, through the household's own account management system, which Natasha had access to, and which she checked occasionally. The review notification appeared in the system. It was standard language. It said a routine compliance review had been initiated. It was not routine. Natasha discovered what had happened with Kwame on a Thursday evening. She had sent him a message. The message was not delivered. She called. The number was inactive. She searched his social media. His profiles were gone. She contacted the gym. She was told, in the careful language of a gym that had been advised by its legal counsel on how to discuss a former employee, that Kwame was no longer with the facility and that they were not able to share further information. She sat with this for 24 hours. She told herself there was an explanation. She told herself she would hear from him. She told herself, and this was the specific quality of the self-deception that the preceding 4 months had required, that she was in a situation she could manage. On the Saturday morning, Nico asked her to come to his study. He had a screen. On the screen was a timeline. The timeline was built from the data, the transaction logs, the access records, the smart home timestamps, the geographic data from the household account's point-of-sale locations. It was not a dramatic presentation. It was not angry. It was a data presentation, delivered in the precise, analytical tone of a man showing a board of directors the results of a quarterly audit. He walked her through it, all of it. The 4 months, the $40,000, the timeline of the gym visits cross-referenced with the weekend retreats, cross-referenced with the spending pattern. She sat very still while he talked. When he finished, he said, "The prenuptial agreement has a relevant clause. I have had my legal team review the evidentiary standard. The documentation you are looking at satisfies that standard. I have instructed my attorneys to begin the formal process. She said, Kwame, he said, has left his position at the gym. The household account has been frozen pending the financial review. She said, you planned all of this. He said, I organized a response. Planning implies I anticipated the situation. I didn't. I simply responded to it the way I respond to everything. She looked at the screen. Then she looked at him. She said, were you ever going to be the kind of husband I actually needed? He considered this. He said, I'm not sure what kind of husband that was. I don't think I was given the information to find out. They looked at each other across the room that he had designed and she had lived in without ever fully living in the house that was networked to servers that had just documented her own life back to her. She said, I want my attorney. He said, that's your right. He closed the screen. The divorce proceedings took 18 months. The prenuptial agreement held. The specific clause, applied to the documented evidence, produced a settlement that was significantly less than Natasha would have received without it. Her attorneys challenged the evidentiary foundation, the argument being that data gathered through smart home systems that the defendant had not been fully informed were monitoring her activities, raised questions about consent and legality. The challenge was not successful. The systems were disclosed in the property agreement she had signed. The monitoring was legal. Kwame rebuilt. He moved to Melbourne. He opened a private training practice. He does not speak about the period in Sydney. He has not had contact with Natasha since the messages stopped being delivered. Natasha moved back to Singapore, the city where Nico had first met her. She works in a creative consultancy now. A small firm, the kind of work that uses her eye and her taste in ways that the Sydney house never had. The people who know her from this period describe her as someone who is more herself than she was before, which is a thing people say, and which usually means something real when they say it this specifically. Nico remains the CEO of Vaultline. The company's valuation has grown since the events of the story. He gives no more personal interviews now than he gave before. The house in Sydney has been sold. He has an apartment now smaller, still networked, still precise. He has been asked, in one technical publication interview that came close to the personal, whether he ever found it strange that the thing that brought his marriage to its end was his own company's infrastructure. He said, data reflects reality. It doesn't create it. The marriage ended because of decisions that were made. The data simply recorded them. It always does. He went back to the technical questions. That is the story of Nico Rivkin, Natasha, and Kwame. The cloud storage empire, the gilded cage, and the data anomaly report on a Monday morning that changed everything. Drop a comment below. Where does the judgment land in this story for you? Natasha in a marriage that had no room for her? Kwame, who didn't build any of this but got dismantled by it? Or Nico, who found out through a dashboard and responded with the most methodical, cold-blooded legal precision you have ever heard? Tell me all of it. This one deserves the full comment section. And if you are not subscribed to Corporate Chaos Scandals, hit that button right now. Like this video. Share it. We are here every single week. I'll see you in the next one.